Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started and to kick off our Global Innovation Readiness webinar series. For this first session, we'll be looking at succeeding in a changing world. And we'll be presenting the Global Minds Network team to you, who will take you through this readiness journey and give you the highlights and some insights on the journey that awaits you. So we're looking at what we'd like to do through this webinar series is really to take a closer look at global innovation readiness from challenge to opportunity, and really to examine the question of how can we better innovate and collaborate in this changing world. So the question is, are you ready to innovate and collaborate in this changing world? And we'd like this to be an interactive webinar series where we explore and discuss how to facilitate innovation and collaboration and moving from concept to market. And we'll be exploring several topics, so from leading globally to leading virtual teams and creating innovation culture throughout this international journey, and where we really hope to help you facilitate global innovation performance and international market success. And the journey will take you across 5 or 6 weeks, 6 sessions, and we'll be meeting every Thursday on May 21st through today through June 25th. So it'll be the same day or same time, same channel. So please note your calendar for every Thursday through June 25th, and also your time zone. So we'll be starting from 8:30 in San Francisco on the West Coast in the US to 11:30 New York City, DC, East Coast, London at 4:30 and 5:30 here in Paris, and 21 hours, 9 o'clock in Bangalore, and very late hour, 11:30 in Beijing, for hopefully for those of you of energy to stay up late. And so today, for this session, we'll look at succeeding in a changing world. And then next week, we'll be looking more closely at leadership, leading global initiatives, and then orchestrating for the following week, June 4th, orchestrating strategic co-creation, and the week thereafter, how to manage virtual teams, and on June 18th, creating a global innovation culture, and then the grand finale on June 25th, looking at how to facilitate global transformation and how to ensure readiness. So really looking at execution, bringing it all together, and looking at the project, marketing, and sales readiness. So 5 tips. We want to make sure you're all there with us and that everybody's on board. So please make sure to check out the Zoom webinar tool at the bar for key buttons. Since this is a Zoom webinar, you mostly have only the Q&A and chat buttons available. So I would recommend the Q&A button for questions during the presentation. And comments, chat, if there are any additional comments you want to make. And so we're going to use the chat button right now to make sure that everything's working fine and you're ready for this journey. If you could say hello and share your level of global innovation readiness. So let's say color code in terms of the score. Green, you're ready to go. You're feeling very confident about innovating for the world. Yellow, you're kind of looking and cruising along, looking at what it's going to take, kind of in the planning and the stage, and also evaluating what needs to happen for global innovation readiness. Or maybe it's red. You really need to pay attention to global innovation readiness and see what's necessary in your organization or for your clients. Or maybe there's just another color. Maybe there's blue. I'm feeling very blue today because I'm looking at great opportunities. It's kind of how I look at global innovation readiness. So say hello, and then we'll make sure that everybody can hear us fine. Let's see what look at the chat. Great, we're having, from different locations, from Paris to DC. And we've got different color scales. Okay, so is there a problem? I see there may be an issue with the sound. I'm gonna ask everybody just for a test check. Can everybody hear me fine? Can you just give a thumbs up or yes or no? It's okay? All right, good. All right, so I think we're ready to go. Feel free to add questions in the Q&A box during our presentation. You will be muted during the presentation session, and then you can unmute yourself during the Q&A session that follows. Or if you prefer to ask a question in video mode, you're able to do that as well. And so would encourage you to share your questions and feedback throughout the presentation, and especially in the open exchange. We really want to hear from you and ensure really a dynamic exchange with everyone. Okay, so we'll get going. We'll launch into our journey here. And a little bit about us, Global Minds Network. Our vision is really about inspiring global minds to collaborate and innovate in order to transform the world. That leads us to our mission, and where we really want to facilitate global innovation and multicultural collaboration for international leaders and teams. And this is to accelerate organizational performance as well as international market success. And our team is ready to do that in many ways, an international advisory network, and we have come together with a vision to connect and inspire global minds. So we're really, bring a mix of backgrounds, very seasoned executives and leaders, change makers, innovators, who all share this passion for multicultural collaboration and how that can serve global innovation. So we bring diverse backgrounds, as mentioned, having worked in international careers with cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary experience. We really bring expertise at the intersection of global innovation, leadership, multicultural collaboration, and digital transformation. So I'd like to introduce the team. A quick word about myself. I'm Karina Jensen. I'm the founder and executive director of Global Minds Network. And my background, my whole passion has been around global leadership and multicultural collaboration. Started my career in industry, spent quite a few years in Silicon Valley working for multinational firms or leading global initiatives, launching new products, services, programs to every region in the world. So wonderful experience. And that led me to an academic path because I saw the need, the greater need for more effective collaboration and looking at ways to optimize that in order to innovate and ensure that truly valuable solutions were delivered to our international markets. So I left for France and pursued my PhD studies, and then transitioned to the academic world where today I'm professor in global innovation leadership and also a practice director at the Center for Leadership and Effective Organizations here in France. So I'd like to, so I'm very excited to introduce the team unfortunately, our colleague, Thomas Arendt, Dr. Thomas Arendt could not join us. He's pictured next to me, big smile and the gray suit. And he brings a fascinating career, has worked for some of the leading multinational firms from SAP to Google to Airbnb to Facebook, and has really led large-scale initiatives globally and internationally, and creating new international departments, as well as developing globalization and localization programs. He has extensive experience in leading teams, as well as innovation from front end to execution. So I'll then would like to introduce you to my colleague, Kai Meng, who will say a few words about her very impressive background.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, just like Corina introduced, we're all from a very diverse international background. For myself, I mostly worked in Silicon Valley and also in China. I am currently running a venture capital fund to dual currency with US dollar fund based in Palo Alto, California, and a Chinese RMB fund based in Beijing. So I go back and forth between these two places, and our fund are dedicated to investment in a new generation of design startups and designers who drive innovation through the integration of design, technology, and business. Before running this fund, in the last 3 years now, I worked for Adobe for 16 years. I started from the localization and globalization department, and responsible for a lot of international initiatives, and eventually set up the Adobe R&D Center in China. So that's my background. I'm so excited to be here.
That's great. Thanks, Kai Meng. And I'd like to introduce Finn Meilegård, who brings extensive experience in global leadership development and innovation cultures.
Hello, everybody, and greeting from southern France in the Alps. It almost sounds like a European Song Contest, doesn't it? I've been working with companies all over the world for almost all my career, and that's quite many years actually. But the last few months has actually shown us how much innovation can be fueled if there is a need for it. We have seen Dyson producing a ventilator in just 10 days. And why did that happen? Did it happen because of great leadership, because of a great organizational structure, because of great financial planning? No, it didn't. It happened because they had a fantastic culture that could actually reinvent their core skills into a new purpose in no time. And that is what my company is doing, and that is what I have been helping companies with all over the world for the past almost 18, 19 years. We help companies creating these winning corporate cultures that actually helps companies survive. We have seen companies during this crisis that have turned around and done tremendous things in no time. We have seen companies we thought were fantastic and beacons in the world collapsing in front of our eyes. And the difference between those who collapse and those who succeed is that they have a culture where people have no fear in innovating and turn their core skills into new purposes. And I think that is one of the greatest things we have learned from this pandemic crisis we are still in. So that is what me and my team are doing, and I'm so grateful being here together with these great people and put the innovation part around it and see what we can help companies and help you guys with all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Finn. Finn's a global leadership and change leader for Global Minds Network. And next, I'd like to introduce my colleague, David Ragland, who's our global innovation and digital leader.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, late evening to everyone. I'm reaching you from Washington, D.C., and I see that some of my former colleagues and friends have joined, so I'm quite happy to see that. I have had about a 30-plus year background, mostly in technology. I started off as a COBOL programmer back in the mid-'80s. I sat in something called a SCIF, which is just a secure compartmental facility behind a cipher lock with no windows and just hammered out code all day. And after a few years of doing that, I said, you know, I really like to talk to the humans. So I moved into some other roles that gave me some access, greater access to the business, and sort of moved up through the ranks before I decided to quit terrorizing the corporate world. I had a brief stint as a CIO for a global company, but about 20 years ago, I was working for America Online, and some of you have read about that in the history books. And that was my first entree into some real global work and global collaboration. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that briefly as the presentation goes on. But I got a real fascination from from that experience in how culture and leadership interact to produce outcomes in global virtual teams. And since then, I had the opportunities to work for a number of global companies. I did a lot of work in Latin America, work in Europe. My last job was with Salesforce, where I actually got the opportunity to move to Europe rather than just traveling there frequently. Along the way, like Karina, I decided I wanted an academic career, so I did some additional graduate work, and including a doctorate in Spain at IE University, and decided I would go into academia, which is what I'm doing now. So I'm teaching at a university part-time here in the US, and then supporting Global Minds Network and doing some consulting activities. So I look forward to interacting with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And finally, I'd like to introduce my colleague Lokesh Venkataswamy, who's our International Innovation and Design Leader.
Hi, everyone. Good evening from Bangalore. This is Lokesh. I'm really excited to be a part of this Global Mind Network, working with beautiful minds over here. Actually, I bring 25 years, more than 25 years of experience in the area of new product development, innovation management, digital transformation, and intellectual property. So prior to my consulting role in Innomantra, I worked for an organization called Larsen & Toubro. It's one of the leading conglomerate in India, and now it's a multinational organization, wherein I was part of the strategic planning. I started as a designer and then moved towards the management role in strategic planning. I was heading the intellectual property and innovation initiatives as a part of the strategic planning. So after 17 years of my experience in this industry in medical equipment and then energy meters and switch gears, basically electrical and automation division, I started along with 4 of my friends and a consulting firm called Innomantra, and we have been working in this innovation consulting and then the digital transformation space. And looking at my experience from these industries, actually, it was always to bring a academic angle also to it, which I also teach as adjunct faculty in few of the business schools, and I'm really excited to be part of this this moment here along with Dr. Karina and colleagues here. So I look forward for an exciting time with you people.
Thank you, Lokesh.
Thank you.
And, okay, so I think we're all ready to accelerate our journey. And so we're going to take you into our world very soon. And this is what our services are all about. It's looking at global innovation readiness and how to prepare international leaders and teams to successfully innovate and collaborate in this multicultural and digitally connected world. And we do that through an array of services around developing that global vision, inclusive dialogue and space, which we'll share with you very soon. Okay, so let's take a look at our world today, as many of us are really looking at, well, how are we going to navigate this quickly changing, global, interdependent, dynamic world that we're experiencing, especially now under the pandemic period, looking at how are we going to connect and successfully. And what we've seen in our experience through the last 2 or 3 decades, it's always been a challenge to successfully connect or collaborate around the world. And what we often see with clients, and as well as in our past experience, employers, is a quick story I'll share with you. And I'm sure many of you will feel it sounds familiar. It will be familiar to many of you. And the challenge really is looking at, well, how can we move from being, you know, moving from a plan that may not always be supported or successful, and really bring you, pivot you to that stage where everyone in your team around the world are engaged, they're excited, and they're on board. And what typically we see happens in this typical story is looking at the global executive who wants to launch this new initiative that's going to change the world, and is very happy to stay on board in headquarters and bring together an exclusive team of strategists and executives to make this happen. And together they'll spend a phase in the world and, you know, create that vision and the plan, and then send it out to the world and over to their teams across the regions, over to across Europe, Asia, Pacific, North America, South America, Middle East, Africa, and feeling that, wow, everybody's going to embrace this, and, you know, it's going to be a big success. And unfortunately, they're met with either silence, or you'll have a few groans around the world, or protests. You know, you'll go through Europe, and you know, the French will be going, n'importe quoi, what is this? You know, the Italians, mamma mia, what's going on here? And you know, over to North America or South America, they're like, what is this? This doesn't really speak to our market. How are we going to, you know, execute this? And in Asia, there's silence. So they may be putting the plan away in a desk drawer somewhere, or in the garbage. So what's happening here is that the executive team and the leadership team will have a very difficult time to implement this successfully. The project is slowed down across disciplines, across cultures, across functions. And as a result, the global launch and success story may not happen. And you'll see that the launch is slowed down, and eventually when it does happen, it doesn't meet with the big fanfare for local customers and markets, and sales plummet. So this is where we don't want to take you, but I'm sure you are familiar with this story, and where we'd really like to see is, well, how can we do a reboot? And especially now, there's such great opportunity moving forward to reset the stage and create a framework or leadership, as well as an organization that's more inclusive, and to start with inclusion in a way to tap into that collective wisdom from the very start. And that's where we want to take you through this webinar series, and look at how to ensure global innovation readiness, and that everybody's on board and they're ready for success around the world. So, quick question for you. What is your global readiness role? Do you see yourself more as a global executive, a project and team leader who's really leading the way for new initiatives, or overseeing new initiatives across the organization? Are you more in the international HR and OD guide? So you're really helping transform or accompany leaders and teams, ensure that effective change happens through the organization, and that they're aligned around the world. Or you may see yourself, you may be a world educator and trainer. Very important role to ensure it happens. How do you ensure the capabilities and competencies are there? That training, the necessary training and skill development needs to happen. So I'm going to give a quick poll to follow up on that, and enable that for you, and see where you are. Who do we have with us today? Which global readiness role would you see yourself in? Okay, give you just a few more seconds. Everybody had a chance to participate. All right, let's end the polling. Okay, so everybody see that? Oh, I gotta share the results. There we go. Now I think you can see on screen. So majority definitely global executive project leader. So you're leading the way for these international initiatives, innovation projects, or new programs, products and services. And very few who are there as guides to accompany and ensure organizational change or transformation. digital transformation. And we have quite a few educators, trainers to ensure that enablement happens for the global workforce. Okay, there we go. Let's see. So we see, let's exit there. Oops. Are we back? Sorry about that, everyone. I think we just had a quick malfunction. There we go. Are we back? Everybody can see the screen? Yes?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that, quick technical error. Okay, so you're really the heroes in our story, the story that around the global launch, the successful global launch. And what we would like to do is see how that we can help you facilitate global innovation and multicultural collaboration on this journey. And this is so essential today around the world to look at how to better connect. We've seen that in wonderful ways throughout the crisis, to how teams are connecting and organizations, leaders are really reaching out as well, and in order to collaborate more effectively across the organization. So how can we ensure that this can accelerate and develop in successful ways for your new initiatives moving forward, whether they be new products, services, or programs? And that is so essential to ensure global performance and looking at from our research and our experience, the ability of organizations to facilitate innovation and multicultural collaboration always affects market performance, as well as organizational performance, of course. So we've seen failures of concept design because there wasn't effective collaboration across geographies. Strategic planning, not always successful either, because leaders weren't able to connect with the right knowledge in those markets and the critical knowledge. Marketing impact as well, how to ensure successful marketing campaign and messaging, operations, and the customer connection, most important of all. So all of this really affects global sales performance. And what we're seeing in research, not only from our own research, but we'll just share a few quick discoveries through the last few years and looking at consultancies too, or what we're seeing in terms of the trends, 3 key trends. One from MIT Sloan Management Review, or their global executive study, looking at digital leaders. Currently, their most recent study on January, 82% agree, 82% of global executives agree that their organization needs to be digitally savvy, especially leaders. However, less than 10% agree that their leaders really have the skills needed to be successful in a digital economy. And another trend I'd like to point out is from Deloitte, and what I've seen with clients and through my research as well, is that more and more towards a team and project-driven organization, younger, more globally diverse leaders, and this will require different kind of leadership and capability. And finally, looking at the global leadership skills, and consistently, we see this, I'm showing just a finding from DDI through the last few years. However, I'm seeing this with other studies as well. Consistently, we see that leaders need to strengthen their competencies and how to lead across cultures, across generations, as well as to inspire employee creativity and innovation. So the question brings us to how can you facilitate innovation in a global, multicultural, and digitally connected environment? Because that's really what we are seeing today. It's complex, but we really do need to pay attention to these three dynamics. And in doing so, we're going to present our global readiness framework, which has been based on a decade of research with hundreds of leaders, global leaders who are responsible for global innovation projects or new initiatives, global initiatives, as well as cross-cultural teams. And they were leaders at 45 multinationals who were all tech-driven organizations. And we found some very interesting discoveries there that really speak to today's environment and moving forward, and how to facilitate collaboration and innovation. So we see this as a continuous circle, a team and project-driven organization, and how to lead through these critical phases through ideation, co-creation, strategic planning, validation, and then go to market to ensure high performance. And there we have found three success levers. That is vision, dialogue, and space. So looking at building that a compelling global vision through inclusive leadership and strategic co-creation, which shapes an inclusive dialogue that will nurture knowledge sharing and cross-cultural learning. And that shapes the space, really building a global innovation culture and creative team climate. So what we will do is quickly share our thoughts and give you a glimpse of what's to come. Through three stops, we'll stop first at vision, and then look at dialogue, and then space. So if we quickly look at vision, so the inclusive leadership, as well as the strategic co-creation, if you look at the global leadership journey today, there is there are a lot of resources, a lot of theories and models that are out there. If you look at your journey, there are really four levels that you travel through. One is building your core leadership ethos, looking at which leadership values and models speak to your leadership ethos. And there are many out there, from trust-driven to servant-driven to values-driven, and which take many forms. And so as you develop your leadership ethos, what is important is looking at how, as you move forward, how does that speak to your team? How does that apply? And how does that really involve your team? And as you're working across the world, as many of you know, there are cultural dimensions. So looking at those cultural differences and how different perspectives within leading and collaborating, innovating can impact project collaboration. And cultural dimensions has been the oldest framework since the 60s. From Hall to Trompenaar to Hofstede to Trompenaars to Meyer and many others. So looking at country scales and cultural differences, which is a great foundation. However, in today's environment, as it's very dynamic and evolving, very team-based, we also need to look at cultural interactions. So looking at global mindset, cultural intelligence, how are you in the moment responding to those differences through the knowledge, through your mindfulness, and how you respond to team members who may have come from two cultures or have different cultural experiences. And that brings us finally to the area where we've seen limited research and where we see greater demand today is how to lead through this global innovation context. Now, how do you integrate your leadership values as well as your knowledge of cultural differences in a global innovation context? And that's the world we see emerging today, is looking at how do you lead these initiatives in this dynamic and networked environment. And that leads to leadership, and we'll be looking at that next Thursday, May 28th. And our research has shown us that more and more in this new environment, global leaders are becoming knowledge facilitators and innovation orchestrators. So we see through this continuous cycle that there are new competencies that need to be developed. So for a leader to really have certain skills or behaviors, empowering behaviors as he or she takes the team through this ideation and co-creation phase, and then through strategic planning, how to be inclusive into knowledge from the market and from the team members, and then how to validate that, decisive behaviors in terms of the analytical processes, and in order to integrate key data and knowledge to create a sound global business plan, and execution where communicative behaviors are essential in nurturing knowledge sharing and looking at cross-cultural learning. So I'm going to, the next session will be led by my colleague David Ragland and myself. So David, I'm going to invite you to, if you have some additional insights you'd like to add for our session.
Sure, Karina, thanks, and thanks for that background. I think everyone is probably cognizant of the fact that our world has suddenly changed. The pandemic has forced many companies to really test the limits of their cloud capabilities. For some companies, they were kind of born digital and they're used to working in this modality. But I think it's fair to say for most companies, it's not something new. As your new competencies slide demonstrated, many companies have been moving in this direction. That's the good news. The bad news is that from one day to the next, companies were suddenly thrown into this new modality, which requires new ways of working, doing, thinking, feeling, leading, following. There are all kinds of other implications for HR, legal, et cetera. And the good news is we were moving in this direction, even within the domain of leadership. I think we've seen leadership styles and techniques and skills changing in a very positive direction in organizations in traditional co-located environments. And I think the good news that so many of those new skills that are emphasized, like empathy and collaboration and inclusion and wearing multiple hats and knowing when to be a follower, even if you're formerly the leader, and all of these things bode well for leadership in a digitally connected world. But I think what we have witnessed is that companies are now saying, hey, we're in this new modality. It's working pretty well, anecdotally at least, from the feedback I get from people to whom I've spoken globally about this. It seems to all be working generally pretty well. The second thing I hear is most people don't want to go fully back to the old way of working. So that leaves us in a situation where we really need to now, in a very focused way, look at the gaps in terms of leading in a digital environment, digital modality. And so that's what this next session is all about. We're going to look at we're going to go below the headline, so to speak, and really look at some of the detailed aspects and nuances of leading. And I actually like to stay away from the term lead, and I prefer the term facilitate, because I think that's what we're going to see. Leaders are going to have to, I think we're going to work in smaller teams. I think there'll be more self-managing teams, and it's just going to require a whole different leadership paradigm. So that's what this next session is all about.
Great. Thanks, David.
Did you want me to elaborate a little more, Karina, or is that enough?
No, that's great. We're going to make sure and give some time to Lokesh too, because that leads us to strategic co-creation and how the importance of front-end innovation and how critical that is for inclusion and collaboration, moving from front-end ideation, strategic planning, and then to new product development and go-to-market. Lokesh, if you're there, I'll
thank you, Karina, and then Dr. David. Actually, your points are highly valid. Actually, in strategic co-creation, the innovation canvas in the organization, if you really look at it's expanding. Actually, it is it's becoming connected, and at the same time, it's becoming complex. So. Looking at the very leading professor from Harvard, the Teresa Mabel, she brought this the three aspects of innovation. That is the task motivation, how individuals need to really they increase their motivation level to drive innovation individually as well as for the organization. That means what it really takes to really solve this problem. How I can really get involved 100% of my time and then my energy on this particular challenge, right? The second aspect is we look at the expertise. The expertise doesn't mean that we need to go back to a violin class to learn violin, how to bring the best violinist to play for your orchestra, right? So today in the gig economy, you need to really bring, and then you should be open enough to really bring the collaborators from the outside so that you can reduce the cycle time of innovation. The third aspect is we look at the creativity tools and techniques. This is one thing actually, like in many organizations that really struggle because they don't really know what is the right tool for me to use in the organization. So what we wanted to really bring in is to bring a common language for innovation. There are multiple tools like design thinking and then various other tools, what it really makes for the organization. So because any innovation to be successful, its front end has to be very strong, and then high quality ideas need to be generated in the front end. Okay, so today the digital and innovation is coming together. The biggest challenge in the organization today, they generate excellent ideas using various techniques, but end of the day, they don't have people to execute these ideas into action. That is a kind of a proof of concept. So people have really openly asked me, like in my experience, I've seen with some of the clients, wherein they don't have people to execute those ideas. So it's very important to have an ecosystem like suppliers, academic institutions, research institutes, and then their own vendors actually. So it's bring all those people and then use their their expertise in bringing on the cycle time of innovation. So the future of our organization will be highly collaborative and complementing to win the next opportunity. Thank you. This session, for example, I'm just going to take this strategic co-creation, how to bring all these threads together and tie, that means how to bring the technology and empower people, and at the same time, you also look at the leadership, like to empower the leadership to think big. So with all this opportunity, you need to to think big actually for the organization. I mean to say, you need to dream big so that your goals are are challenging. The goals are achievable using the strategic co-creation. This is what I'm going to talk about using the tool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lokesh. Great. So we're going to move on to our next stop, which is dialogue. So how can we ensure leadership for today's virtual environment, global teams, and nurture that knowledge sharing and learning along the way? And as we found in our research, multicultural collaboration is still a great challenge. And we point to trust building, team participation, interactive dialogue, understanding supportive global strategy. All of these are challenges in leading global teams, especially virtually. And in today's environment, more attention needs to be placed at the digital platforms. So looking at how to connect through the social network, and looking at how that will nurture knowledge sharing and then cross-cultural learning. So I'll bring it back to David to give a glimpse, a quick view of what we can expect for our session 4 on global virtual teams.
Thanks so much, Karina, and that's a perfect background. I'm really excited about this webinar session that I'll be leading, because this has really been the focus of my research for the past 20 years. I had mentioned that about 20 years ago I was working for America Online, AOL, which today I'm not even sure would be a footnote in textbooks, but back then they were a leading edge global company. And what I found interesting, I was suddenly given the opportunity to lead a global effort. And prior to that, I had been leading co-located teams, project teams. And, AOL as a global company had just about every nationality represented there at the corporate headquarters. So we were not strangers to working across cultures, but we were doing so mostly in a co-located fashion. And suddenly I was given this project to lead a distributed team across, I forget how many countries. We probably had 60 or 70 people on the team. So we had time and space issues, all mediated by technology, and then we had cultural opportunities, I'll say. And I started noticing that at first I thought it would just be the same as leading a co-located team, but I very quickly discovered that no, there was something really different about this. The elements of time and space and culture and technology really presented some new challenges. And so I started looking for empirical literature that would inform me how to best lead these teams. And I found there to be a dearth of empirical studies in the literature at the time, and that prompted me to pursue eventually some doctoral work focused on this theme. But at the time, I said, wait a minute, why is it so different? And I thought, okay, here are the differences. When something started going wrong, or if something wasn't clear in a co-located team, I could do things like run down the hall and have a conversation with someone. And, as humans, we all resonate on so many subconscious levels when we're face to face. And that becomes much more attenuated in a global virtual environment. And then when you add in the dimensions of culture, it becomes even more complex. The punchline here, the one thing I knew was that it was fairly common knowledge even back then that heterogeneous, diverse teams can outperform homogeneous teams almost every time. If over time, it does take time to get there, but if you know how to do it and you know how to unlock the potential, then these teams typically outperform co-located homogeneous teams almost every time. So I became quite interested in this domain. My research examined the interaction of leadership and cultural diversity on team cohesion, and team cohesion is kind of a proxy for productivity. So I used a lot of the seminal research that Karina referenced, like the Hofstede studies, I used the Globe studies, and then I used transformational and transactional leadership. And the thing I'd like to say about that is the same thing that Karina said. This seminal research provided a fantastic foundation. But what I've seen is organizations like Global Minds Network have now taken that and they've advanced it, and we're applying it to the real world. And that's what's so exciting. So that's what we're really going to focus on in that session. We're going to take a deep dive on some of the challenges and some of the gaps and some of the mitigation strategies.
That's great. Thanks, David. And I know you have a wealth of experience. You were very modest because David has also led 2 global consulting firms in IT consulting, as well as his most recent experience leading a new initiative at Salesforce. So he'll have a fresh experience to share with you, a lot of insights. Okay, so we're going to go on to our last stop around space. And so how do you nurture, develop this organizational culture or global innovation culture and creative team climate as well as optimizing cultural diversity? What we have found through our research there, building global innovation cultures is really around 3 values, what we found from leading multinational firms. And that's around the values of cultural empathy, creativity, and collaboration. So organizations that can truly optimize the culturally diverse talent, ensure that it's team driven and that those culturally diverse teams truly represent their customers and markets. And that they appreciate this and optimize that diversity for creativity and innovation. And then creativity, really nurturing and ensuring space and time for every team around the globe, local, global, and regional, to have that time to ideate and think innovatively. And finally, collaboration. How does an organization nurture that culture of transparency and knowledge sharing, where collaboration is really seen as a priority? And that leads to a team climate that's responsive, that is transparent and entrepreneurial, and ultimately ensures successful execution. And so I'd like to invite my colleague Finn to talk about his session around this culture and building that global innovation culture for optimizing cultural diversity.
Well, hello again, everybody. I hopefully think that by now you have understood that all this complex framework about making global teams successful is really complex. So we have to divide it into smaller parts and put the parts together afterwards. It's not as easy as it was just years ago, because the complexity and the speed of change has increased dramatically over the past years and just over the recent months. And that is why I said before that we have seen teams who have performed fantastically and developed what we need right now in no time. And we have seen companies who have been successful for a very long time collapsing. That has everything to do with culture. And that is what I'm going to focus on in my session. And I'm focusing on organizational culture. In my company, Cooking, we have worked with more than 600 companies since 2001 all over the world. And we have never had a single situation where the cultural clashes were around national cultures. It was always around something else. It could be between two corporate cultures when we have been facilitating a post-merger integration. It could be between different profession cultures within the same company, where the different professions or job types, they are in a kind of civil war with each other. Could have been between different age groups, between different education groups, all sorts of cultural clusters that have to work together. And so that is why it's so important that we don't stereotype. And that is one other thing I will focus on, that when you see two people or two groups of people who are different in one another way, you literally have a choice how your brain starts looking at it. If you start by looking at how are these two groups of people different, your brain starts making a long list of how these two groups of people are different. And when you have that long list in your head, it's very difficult afterwards to find out, okay, let's start, what do they have in common? It's mentally very, very difficult. But we have a switch up here in our brain that we can put in another position, in a position where we can teach ourselves to start looking for commonalities and similarities between groups. And that is the starting point for developing cultural intelligence. And these are some of the things I will put together in my seminar, how we can create cultural intelligence, so we can create synergies from diversity. And as David said before, when you have a culturally diverse team in any dimension, that team with the right level of cultural intelligence will at any time outperform a monocultural team. I've seen it so many times with the companies that we have been working with, that if you only have a group of engineers who are doing product development, and when they have done the product, made the product and handed it over to the sales department, they're going to fail. They would have succeeded 20 years ago. Just look at Nokia. They won't succeed today. So creating that mindset where you elevate the level of cultural intelligence in the entire organization and start focusing on the similarities instead of differences, that is how we're going to succeed. And that is what will lead to execution success. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to see you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Finn. Okay, so that leads us to our final stop, and that's for the session 6 around global transformation and global innovation readiness. And we hope that in this session, I'll be presenting the full framework, and we'll look at the success levers that will ensure readiness for you and your organization, as well as your clients. So looking at how do you move forward now to develop that global compelling vision and through inclusive leadership and strategy, looking at the dialogue and how to develop and nurture knowledge sharing and cross-cultural learning to tap into the collective wisdom of your global and local teams, and then nurturing that space or shaping that space for a global innovation culture. And we'll look at readiness finally, because then if you're going to be truly ready, we need to ensure execution is there. So also take a closer look at marketing and sales readiness in order to ensure that your global initiative will be a worldwide success. And we'll draw inspiration from some of these organizations that we've researched, as well as where we've collaborated. and bring in inspirations from Philips to how to develop strategic co-creation, design thinking with the leaders, to Airbnb on sharing local customer stories, and Adobe on developing hybrid environments from virtual to live with teams in order to collaborate. And then looking closer at innovation cultures too, such as Siemens and Lenovo, who have truly developed a sense of global innovation culture. And a few innovative organizations too, or what they're doing in terms of technology and crowdsourcing through Wipro to Cisco. Okay, so we've come to the end of our journey for this session. We want to thank you and wish you a bon voyage for the remaining sessions. For more info, and please stay, because we still have time for questions, but just to let you know, in terms of contact information, you have my contact information there, Karina Jensen, if you want to follow up for more questions or information. To stay updated, you have our LinkedIn page and to follow us. And if you want more resources, there's the Leading Global Innovation book, which presents the framework and more insights on the tools and practices, as well as the success stories. And we also have a readiness test drive for you if you want to really check out your readiness, and we'll be applying that for the last session. So we have some time. We have a few minutes left over for Q&A, and also we want to make sure that you don't miss out on the next session, Thursday, May 28th, on leadership. So your next stop, that David Ragland and I will be co-facilitating that session, presenting. And we do have a special guest speaker. David, do you want to mention our guest speaker?
Yes, thank you, Karina. I am extremely excited and honored to be able to introduce a former colleague and very good friend of mine, Monica Sanchez, who will be joining us for this session. Monica has a tremendous amount of very successful global leadership experience. She's been a CIO. Monica and I worked together when we were at AIG and in AIG's Latin American division, region. She is from Argentina.